I stood at my parents' dining table on New Year's Eve, champagne glass raised, watching snowflakes drift past the window behind my mother's head. The moment should have been perfect. Family together, a year ending, hope beginning. Then Mom cleared her throat and announced, her voice cutting through the warmth like ice. "Your sister's overwhelmed. You'll be paying her rent from now on. Simple as that." My father smirked from his seat, adding with casual cruelty, "If you say no, don't come back." The room went silent. Everyone waited. I looked at my sister Amber, at my parents, at the life they'd scripted for me without asking. Then I raised my glass higher and said, "Then goodbye. And good luck paying your problems." I walked out into the snowy Pennsylvania night, leaving my stunned family behind, and felt the first breath of freedom it'd taken in years. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove away from that house, my childhood home in the suburbs, 20 minutes outside Pittsburgh. The wipers swept snow from the windshield in rhythm with my racing thoughts. How had I gotten here? How had my own family become strangers willing to ambush me at a holiday dinner? I pulled into the parking lot of a budget motel off the highway, the kind with flickering neon signs and rates by the hour. It was all I could think to do. I wasn't going back, and I needed time to process what had just happened. Inside the small room that smelled of industrial cleaner and old carpet, I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself remember. 3 years ago, I was working 2 jobs to put myself through state college. I waited tables at night, worked retail on weekends, and studied engineering during every spare moment I could find. I remember falling asleep over textbooks at 3 in the morning, my body aching from a double shift, knowing I had an exam in 5 hours. My parents never offered to help. They said it would build character, teach me responsibility. Meanwhile, my younger sister Amber got her full tuition paid to attend a private university 2 hours away. She got a new car for her 18th birthday. She got spending money deposited into her account every month. I graduated with my engineering degree and not a single dollar of debt because I worked myself to exhaustion for 4 years. I was proud of that. I thought my parents would be proud too. They came to graduation, took photos, posted them online. But the pride felt hollow, performative. Within a week, they were back to their usual dynamic, treating my accomplishments as expected while treating Amber's struggles as tragedies requiring intervention. Amber dropped out of her private university halfway through junior year. She moved back home, and my parents blamed the pressure, blamed mental health, blamed everything except the fact that they'd never required her to work for anything in her life. I didn't judge her for struggling. College is hard. Life is hard. But the difference in how they treated our struggles created a rift I didn't know how to bridge. I got my first job as a junior engineer in Pittsburgh a month after graduation. The pay wasn't spectacular, but it was stable, and it was mine. I found a small apartment in a decent neighborhood, furnished it slowly with thrift store finds and hand-me-downs. I built a life that was simple but independent, and for the first time, I felt like an adult. Meanwhile, Amber bounced between retail jobs, never lasting more than a few months at any one place. She'd complain about managers, co-workers, customers. My parents would nod sympathetically and slip her cash to tide her over until the next job. She was 25 years old and had never paid a bill on time in her life. 6 months ago, my parents decided Amber needed her own apartment. They said it would give her independence, help her grow up, provide structure. They found her a place in a trendy neighborhood, 1 bedroom with exposed brick and high ceilings. Rent was $1,400 a month. My own rent was $900, and I'd searched for weeks to find something that affordable. They signed the lease, paid the deposit, and told Amber this was her fresh start. Except they kept paying her rent every month. They kept giving her spending money. They kept enabling every impulse purchase and last-minute plan. Amber's independence was a theater production with my parents as the stagehands. working behind the curtain to make sure she never had to face real consequences. Last Thanksgiving, my mother made a comment over turkey. She said I should help family more now that I was doing so well. I'd just gotten a small raise at work, nothing dramatic, but apparently my father had mentioned it. I brushed off the comment, thinking it was just Mom's usual guilt-tripping about not visiting enough or calling enough. I didn't realize it was a seed being planted for a much larger manipulation. I lay back on the scratchy motel comforter and checked my phone. 12 missed calls, all from my parents. A barrage of text messages filled my screen. Most were from my mother, rambling paragraphs about family obligation and disappointment. My father's messages were shorter, colder. The last one from my mother made my stomach drop. Your grandmother is very disappointed in you. We told her what you did. I sat up, anger flooding through me. They'd already called my grandmother? It was barely an hour since I'd walked out. They were already spinning the narrative, painting me as the villain before I'd even had a chance to process what happened. I could imagine the story they told. Ungrateful son refuses to help struggling sister, abandons family on New Year's Eve. Cold-hearted and selfish. I blocked their numbers. I didn't have the energy to defend myself. Not tonight. I lay in that anonymous motel room and felt the weight of realization settle over me. This wasn't a spontaneous demand. They'd planned this. They'd chosen New Year's Eve specifically, a holiday gathering where family pressure would be at its peak, where saying no would seem especially cruel. They'd orchestrated an ambush and expected me to fall in line, but I hadn't. I'd walked away, and despite the hurt and anger coursing through me, I also felt something unexpected. Liberation. For the first time in my adult life, I'd set a boundary with my parents. I'd said no. The consequences would come. I knew that. But in this moment, alone in a cheap motel room on New Year's Eve, I felt strangely free. The first 2 weeks of January felt like living under siege. I returned to my apartment in Pittsburgh the next morning, trying to focus on getting back to work after the holiday break. My engineering firm had a big project deadline approaching, and I needed to concentrate. Instead, my phone became a weapon aimed at my peace of mind. The calls started on January 2nd. Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called during my lunch break. I answered, thinking she might be checking in about something normal. Instead, she launched into a prepared speech about family helping family, about how Amber was struggling, about how I was being selfish. I tried to explain what actually happened, but she talked over me. She'd clearly been given a script by my mother. Uncle Dave called that evening, then my cousin Nathan the next morning, then my cousin Claire, who I hadn't spoken to in probably 3 years, sent a long text message about how disappointed she was in me. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They'd been told a version of events that painted me as the villain who refused to help his mentally ill sister in her time of need. The worst part was how little any of them wanted to hear my side. When I tried to explain that I'd been ambushed, that this wasn't about refusing to help but about refusing to be manipulated, they accused me of making excuses. When I pointed out that Amber was 25 and capable of working, they said I didn't understand mental health. When I mentioned that my parents had never helped me through college while fully funding Amber's education, they said I sounded bitter and jealous. My mother sent passive-aggressive text messages from a new number I hadn't blocked. Photos of Amber looking sad. Vague mentions of bills piling up. Dramatic statements about stress and worry. Each message was calculated to trigger guilt, to make me feel responsible for problems I didn't create. My father sent one email. Just one. But it cut deeper than all of my mother's manipulations combined. A real man takes care of his family. Guess we raised a boy, not a man. I stared at that email for 20 minutes, feeling rage and hurt war inside me. This was the man who'd taught me to ride a bike. who'd come to my high school graduation, who'd shaken my hand when I got my first engineering job, and had reduced our entire relationship to this. My worth as a man measured by my willingness to bankroll my sister's irresponsibility. My work performance started suffering. I was distracted during meetings, short-tempered with coworkers, unable to focus on the technical problems that usually absorbed me completely. My friend Brad, who worked in the cubicle next to mine, noticed during a project review meeting when I completely blanked on a question from our supervisor. "You okay, man?" he asked over lunch that day. "You seem off." I hadn't planned to tell anyone. It felt like airing family drama, like exposing dysfunction that should stay private. But Brad was a good friend, and I was drowning. So I told him everything. The New Year's Eve ambush, the family pressure campaign, the emails and texts and calls from relatives I barely knew, all telling me what a terrible person I was. Brad listened without interrupting, his expression growing more shocked as the story unfolded. When I finished, he set down his sandwich and shook his head. "Man, that's some next-level manipulation. They're not trying to get you to help your sister. They're trying to break you down so you'll do whatever they want for the rest of your life." Something about hearing it said out loud by someone outside the situation made it click into place. This wasn't about rent money. This was about control. This was about establishing a pattern where my parents could make demands and I would comply, where my resources and my life were considered family property to be distributed as they saw fit. Brad suggested I document everything, keep records of the texts, the calls, the emails. He said if this escalated, I might need proof of harassment. The suggestion felt dramatic at the time, like he was overreacting, but I took his advice. I started taking screenshots of every message. I kept a notebook with dates and times of phone calls, names of relatives who contacted me, summaries of what they said. It felt paranoid, but also empowering. I was building a record of what was really happening. The guilt was still there, though. Late at night, lying in bed, I'd wonder if I was wrong. Maybe I should just pay Amber's rent. It was only $1,400 a month. I could afford it, technically. It would make all this pressure stop. My extended family would forgive me. My parents would welcome me back. Everything could go back to normal. Except it wouldn't be normal. It would be surrender. And once I established the precedent that I would cave to family pressure, where would it end? Would I be expected to pay for Amber's car next? Her credit card debt? Would I be funding my parents' retirement while they spent their money on whatever they wanted? The boundary it set on New Year's Eve wasn't about being cruel. It was about survival. Mid-January, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Heavy cardstock, elegant calligraphy addressing, a wedding invitation. My cousin Jennifer was getting married in April. I opened it with a sense of dread, and there, tucked inside with the RSVP card, was a handwritten note. "Jaden, I hope you'll be there to celebrate with us, but ill understand if your conscience won't let you face the family. Love, Grandma." I sat on my apartment floor with that note in my hands and felt the full weight of what my parents had accomplished. They'd successfully poisoned my entire extended family against me. My grandmother, who'd babysat me as a child, who'd taught me to bake cookies and told me stories about my grandfather, believed I was some kind of monster. The wedding would be a family gathering where I'd be treated like a pariah. April felt both impossibly far away and terrifyingly close. I put the invitation on my kitchen counter and didn't RSVP. I couldn't imagine going, couldn't imagine facing the judgment and whispers and disappointed looks, but not going felt like letting my parents win, like allowing their false narrative to become the accepted truth. I was trapped between two bad choices, and the stress of it was eating me alive. Late January brought cold that settled into your bones, the kind of Pennsylvania winter where the sun barely appeared for days at a time. I'd fallen into a routine of work, gym, home, repeat. I avoided social situations where someone might ask about my family. I screened all my calls. I existed in a state of defensive isolation, waiting for the next attack. So when my doorbell rang on a Tuesday evening, I approached with caution. I looked through the peephole and froze. Amber stood in the hallway, hands shoved in her coat pockets, looking uncomfortable and cold. I stood there for a long moment, hand on the doorknob, debating. Was this another manipulation? Had my parents sent her to guilt me into compliance? But something about her posture, the way she wouldn't look directly at the door, made me open it. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. "I need to talk to you." I stepped aside and let her enter. She walked into my small living room like she was entering a stranger's home, not her brother's apartment. She wouldn't sit until I gestured to the couch, and even then she perched on the edge like she might need to run at any moment. We sat in awkward silence. I wasn't going to make this easy. If she'd come to deliver another guilt trip, she could do the work of starting that conversation. But what came out of her mouth surprised me. "I'm sorry." She looked at her hands, twisting them together in her lap. "I'm so sorry, Jaden, for all of it." Then she started crying. Not delicate tears, but full, body-shaking sobs. I grabbed tissues from the bathroom and handed them to her, still wary but feeling my defensive walls crack slightly. When she could speak again, the story that came out was worse than I'd imagined. She told me that Mom and Dad had been using her as a pawn for years, that every financial struggle she had was shared with them in detail, not because they wanted to help her become independent, but because they wanted leverage, that when I walked out on New Year's Eve, our parents hadn't been upset. They'd been calculating. Mom said if you wouldn't help willingly, they'd make you look so bad you'd have no choice. Amber said, wiping her eyes. They wanted you isolated, desperate, willing to do anything to get back into the family's good graces. Then you'd agree to their terms. I felt sick. You knew about this the whole time. No. She shook her head vehemently. I didn't know they were planning to ambush you at New Year's. I knew they'd been talking about you helping me with rent, but I thought they were going to ask you privately, normally. When Mom announced it at dinner like that, I was shocked. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there like a coward and let it happen. The guilt in her voice was genuine. I could see it in every line of her face, the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I'm tired of being their tool." She looked up at me finally, and I saw something I hadn't seen in my sister in years. Clarity. I'm 25 years old, and I can't even pay my own phone bill. I can't make a decision without checking with them first. They pay my rent and hold it over my head every single day. Mom says things like, "We sacrifice everything for you, and you owe us." Dad uses the money to control me. He says he'll never make it without them, and I started to believe it. She pulled an envelope from her purse, wrinkled and worn like it had been read many times. I found this in Mom's desk when I was looking for stamps. It's a letter Dad wrote to Mom last year. They were planning this for months, Jaden. They decided you were doing too well, that you needed to contribute more to the family. They saw your raise as their money, and they decided the best way to get it was to make you responsible for me. I took the letter but didn't read it. I believed her. Everything she was saying aligned with the calculated nature of that New Year's Eve ambush. "What do you want to happen now?" I asked. "I want to break free," she said, her voice stronger. "I don't know how, but I can't keep living like this. They're suffocating me, and watching what they're doing to you, the way they've turned the whole family against you. It made me realize they'll do anything to maintain control. I don't want to be controlled anymore." We talked for 2 hours that night. Really talked, maybe for the first time since we were kids. She told me about the constant criticism disguised as concern, the way our parents monitored her bank account and questioned every purchase, the way they'd undermined every attempt she made at independence. I told her about the pressure campaign, the family members calling to attack me, the feeling of being under siege. By the end of the conversation, we had the beginnings of a plan. I would help her find a cheaper apartment, something she could actually afford on her own. We'd work on a budget together. She'd look for full-time work with benefits, something stable. And we'd do it all quietly, without telling our parents, until she was ready to make the break. "Thank you," she said at my door, hugging me for the first time in years. "Thank you for not giving up on me. We're going to get through this," I told her, both of us. After she left, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Amber and I were on the same team. Maybe we could actually break free from the dysfunction we'd grown up in. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my building manager, Scott, a retired firefighter who managed the complex. "Hey, Jaden. Got a weird call today I wanted to check with you about," he said. "Someone called claiming to be from your employer, said you'd been fired and wouldn't be able to pay rent. Wanted to know about your lease terms and if we'd start eviction proceedings." My blood went cold. "What did you tell them?" "I told them it was none of their business and that tenant information is confidential. But it seemed fishy, so I wanted to verify with you." "You still employed?" "Yes. Very much employed. And I have no idea who would make a call like that. But I did know. My parents were escalating. They were trying to sabotage my housing, trying to create the desperation they needed to force me into compliance. If I lost my apartment, if I had an eviction on my record, it'd be vulnerable. It'd need help, and they'd be right there, ready to rescue me in exchange for total obedience. I thanked Scott and hung up. Then I sat down and added this incident to my documentation. Brad had been right. I needed records of everything. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was harassment bordering on criminal behavior. The hope I'd felt after Amber's visit was now mixed with a cold understanding. My parents weren't going to stop. They weren't going to accept my boundary and move on. They were going to escalate until they broke me, or until I found a way to stop them permanently. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. February arrived with the kind of cold that made walking from the parking lot to my office building feel like an endurance test. But the weather was nothing compared to the chill I felt watching my phone, waiting for the next attack. I'd taken Brad's advice seriously. I contacted my HR department and explained the situation in vague terms, saying I had a family member who might try to impersonate me or spread false information about me at work. The HR director, a woman named Patricia with 30 years of experience, took notes and assured me she'd flag my file. She'd seen family conflicts spill into workplaces before, she said. She'd handle it with discretion. I changed every password I had. Bank accounts, credit cards, email, social media. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything. I called my bank and credit card companies, adding verbal passwords and extra security measures. I felt paranoid doing it all. But after the fake call to my building manager, I knew my parents were willing to cross lines I'd never imagined. A week passed with relative quiet. I started to think maybe they'd exhausted their tactics. Then I got called into a meeting with my supervisor, Helen, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd been with the engineering firm for 20 years. She closed her office door, which was never a good sign. "Jaden, we need to talk about something that came through our general company email." She turned her computer monitor so I could see. An email, sent from a generic Gmail account, addressed to Helen and several other managers. The subject line read, "Concerned about employee." The body of the email claimed that I had drug and alcohol problems, that I was becoming increasingly unstable, that my family was worried about my behavior and thought my employer should be aware. I felt my face flush hot, then cold. That's not true. None of that is true. I know, Helen said, her voice calm. Your work has been solid. You've never shown signs of substance abuse, and frankly, this email is so vague and anonymous that it reads as malicious rather than genuinely concerned. But HR requires that I document this complaint and have a conversation with you about it. I explained the family situation, not in dramatic detail, but enough for Helen to understand that I'd set a boundary with my parents and they were retaliating. I told her about the fake call to my building manager. I showed her the screenshots of some of the harassing messages I'd received. Helen listened, her expression growing more concerned. This is beyond normal family conflict. This is harassment. Have you considered getting a restraining order? I've thought about it, I admitted. But they're my parents. It feels extreme. Jaden, they're trying to destroy your career. That's pretty extreme. She leaned forward, her tone serious but kind. I'm going to note in the HR file that this complaint appears to be part of ongoing family harassment. If anything else comes through, you let me know immediately. And seriously, consider legal options. This kind of behavior tends to escalate, not stop on its own. I left her office feeling humiliated despite Helen's support. My parents had reached into my workplace, the one area of my life where I'd felt competent and respected, and tried to poison it. They'd tried to make my boss doubt me, tried to create a record that could follow me for years. That evening, I met Amber at a coffee shop across town, far from anywhere our parents might accidentally see us. She arrived, looking tired, shadows under her eyes. When I told her about the email to my employer, she put her head in her hands. Mom asked me last week if I knew your boss' name. I didn't think anything of it. I told her it was Helen something, and that you worked at an engineering firm downtown. I didn't give her the company name, but she must have found it online. It's not your fault, I said, though part of me was frustrated. You couldn't have known she'd use it like that. I should have known. She uses everything as a weapon. Amber looked up, her jaw set. I'm done. I'm completely done with them. Over the next hour, we made real plans. I helped Amber update her resume, highlighting the retail management experience she'd gained. We practiced interview questions, worked on her confidence. She admitted she'd never really tried to find a better job because our parents always made her feel incapable. But sitting there in that coffee shop, working through her qualifications, she started to see herself differently. By mid-February, Amber had applied to 15 administrative assistant positions at various companies. By the end of February, she'd had 5 interviews, and in early March, she got an offer. Full-time administrative assistant at a medical supply company, $40,000 a year with benefits. It wasn't a fortune, but it was stable, respectable income. She called me from her car after accepting the offer, crying happy tears. I did it. I actually did it on my own. You did, I said, grinning despite everything. I'm proud of you. We met that weekend and went apartment hunting. I'd researched cheaper neighborhoods, places with lower crime rates, but less trendy appeal than where she currently lived. We found a studio apartment in a quiet area, $850 a month including utilities. It was small but clean, with good natural light and updated appliances. Together, we did the math. With her new salary, after taxes, she could afford the rent, groceries, phone bill, and basic expenses. There wouldn't be much left over, but she'd be truly independent for the first time in her life. She signed the lease that day, move-in date set for April 1st. On the drive back, Amber said, I'm going to tell them I'm moving, but I'm not giving them my new address. Are you ready for how they'll react? No, but I'm doing it anyway. I felt proud of her in that moment. She was scared, but she was doing it. She was choosing freedom over comfort, uncertainty over control. It gave me hope that maybe we really could both break free. 3 days before Amber's scheduled move, my phone rang at 11 at night. Amber's name on the screen. I answered to the sound of her panicked breathing. He took my keys. He took my car keys and he won't give them back. Slow down. Who took your keys? Dad. Hez here. Mom's here. They found out about the new job and the apartment. Mom threatened to call the police and tell them I'm mentally unstable if I don't stop this. Dad took my car keys and said I'm not going anywhere until I come to my senses. Jaden, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. My hands tightened around the phone. Give me your address. I'm coming right now. I drove faster than I should have, mind racing. This had crossed a line from manipulation into something darker. They were physically preventing an adult from leaving. They were using the threat of false police reports to control her. This wasn't just dysfunction anymore. This was dangerous. When I pulled up to Amber's apartment complex, I saw our parents' car still in the parking lot. I called Amber from the parking lot. I'm here. Are they still inside? Dad's blocking the door. Mom's in here with me. Jaden, I don't know what to do. They keep saying I'm having a breakdown, that I'm not thinking clearly. You're thinking perfectly clearly. They're the ones who've lost perspective. I'm coming up. I hung up and headed for the building entrance, my heart pounding. This was about to get very ugly, but Amber needed help, and I wasn't going to leave her trapped with them. Whatever happened next, we'd face it together. The hallway to Amber's apartment felt longer than it should have been. I could hear raised voices before I even reached her door. When I turned the corner, my father stood in the doorway, arms crossed, blocking the entrance like a bouncer at a club. You need to leave, he said when he saw me. This is between us and your sister. She called me. She asked me to come. So move aside. She's not well, Jaden. Can't you see that? This sudden job, this apartment, it's all some manic episode. She needs help, not enabling. I looked at my father and barely recognized him. This was the man who taught me to check my oil, to shake hands firmly, to stand up for what was right. Now he was standing in a doorway, lying about his daughter's mental health to justify controlling her. She's an adult. She got a job. She signed a lease. That's not mania. That's independence. Now get out of the way. No, his voice went hard. You've poisoned her against us. You've turned her into this. If you think I'm going to let you destroy this family, you're wrong. I pulled out my phone, then calling the police. You wouldn't. Watch me. I dialed 911, and my father's eyes widened. I put the phone on speaker so he could hear the dispatcher answer. 911, what's your emergency? I need an officer at an address. My adult sister is being prevented from leaving her apartment. Someone is blocking the door and holding her property against her will. My father stepped aside then, fury in his eyes. I canceled the call and apologized to the dispatcher, saying the situation had been resolved. But I kept my phone in my hand and walked into the apartment. My mother sat on Amber's couch, tissues in hand, makeup streaked from crying. Real or performed, I couldn't tell anymore. Amber stood across the room, her face pale and scared. Amber, do you want to leave? I asked clearly, formally, wanting no ambiguity. Yes, I want to leave. They won't give me my car keys. I turned to my father. Give her the keys. She's my daughter, and she's not well. This is family business, not legal business. Holding someone's property against their will is theft. Preventing an adult from leaving is false imprisonment. You want to have this conversation with the police. I didn't know if I was right about the legal terms, but I said it with enough confidence that my father wavered. My mother stood up, her voice rising. You've turned her against us. Our own son poisoned our daughter's mind, and now you're threatening us? What kind of person are you? The kind who recognizes abuse when he sees it. The word hung in the air like a bomb. My mother gasped. My father's face turned red, but I didn't take it back, because that's what this was. Not the hitting kind of abuse, but the control kind. The manipulation kind. The kind that made you question your own sanity and worth until you couldn't function without your abuser's approval. I called the non-emergency police line. A real call this time, no bluff. I gave them the address and explained calmly that there was a dispute over property and someone preventing an adult from leaving. The dispatcher said an officer would arrive shortly. We waited in tense silence. My father stood near the door like he was considering leaving before the police arrived. But my mother's pride kept them there. She wasn't going to let me win, wasn't going to let it look like she'd done anything wrong. 20 minutes later, an officer arrived. Young guy, probably late 20s, with the patient expression of someone used to family disputes. He talked to each of us separately, asked Amber if she wanted to leave. She said yes, asked if anyone had threatened her. She hesitated, then said yes, that our mother had threatened to make a false police report about her mental health. Asked if property was being withheld. She pointed to her car keys in our father's pocket. The officer came back to the living room where we all stood. "Sir, she's an adult. You need to return her property. She has the right to leave." My mother started crying harder, telling the officer how worried they were, how Amber had mental health problems, how Eid manipulated her. The officer listened politely, then repeated himself. "She's an adult. If you believe she's a danger to herself or others, you can pursue mental health resources through proper channels, but you can't hold her here or take her property. Return the keys, please." My father, fury barely contained, pulled the keys from his pocket and dropped them on the coffee table. My mother stood up, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. "You're both dead to us," she said, her voice cold and final. "You'll regret this. When you're struggling and alone, don't come crying to us." They left. The officer stayed for another 10 minutes, suggesting Amber document everything and consider a restraining order if the harassment continued. He gave her a card with the case number and his contact information. Then he left, and Amber and I stood in her apartment in the sudden quiet. Amber started shaking. I guided her to the couch and she collapsed into it, tears finally coming. Not sad tears, relief tears. The kind that come when you've been holding your breath for so long you forgot what breathing normally felt like. "We're packing you up tonight," I said. "Whatever you need immediately, we're taking it now. The rest can wait until tomorrow. But you're not staying here." She nodded, unable to speak yet. We spent the next hour filling garbage bags with clothes, toiletries, important documents. I texted Brad, explained what happened, asked if he could come over with his truck tomorrow to help move furniture. He responded immediately. "Absolutely. What time?" Amber stayed at my apartment that night, sleeping on my couch with every light in the place on because she didn't want darkness. I sat in the chair nearby, unable to sleep, processing what had happened. We'd crossed a line tonight. There was no going back from calling the police on your own parents. Whatever fragile thread had connected us to them was severed now. Over the next few days, Brad and his wife helped us move Amber's belongings to her new apartment. We worked quickly, efficiently, getting her out of the old place before our parents could show up and cause another scene. Amber turned in her keys to her old landlord and blocked our parents' phone numbers. She changed her emergency contacts to list me instead of them. She was cutting ties completely. Her new apartment was small but felt safe. We spent an afternoon setting it up, arranging furniture, hanging pictures. She stood in the middle of the living room and spun slowly, taking it all in. "It's mine," she said softly. "Actually mine. They don't have keys. They don't pay for it. They can't take it away." The first week of April, Amber started her new job. She came over for dinner that evening, exhausted but energized. She talked about her coworkers, her desk, the training she'd received. She was nervous about doing well, worried she'd mess up somehow. But she was trying, really trying. I helped her set up a budget spreadsheet, showing her how to track expenses and savings. She had never done it before. Our parents had always just given her money when she needed it, never teaching her to manage it herself. Now she was learning, and I could see her confidence growing with each skill she mastered. By the end of April, she sent me a text that made everything worth it. I paid my first rent check from my own account, on time, by myself. I'm 25 and I finally feel like an adult. Thank you. We started having weekly dinners, alternating who cooked. Slowly, we rebuilt our relationship, not as the dysfunctional siblings we'd been, caught in our parents' manipulation, but as two adults who'd survived something together and come out stronger. I thought maybe we'd done it. Maybe we'd broken free. Maybe the worst was over. Then, early May, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. I signed for it with a sense of dread, and when I opened it, that dread proved justified. Margaret and Thomas were suing me. The legal terms were dense, but the essence was clear. They were claiming elder abuse and alienation of affection. They said Id manipulated Amber, caused them emotional distress, and they were seeking $50,000 in damages. I sat on my apartment floor with that letter and felt something break inside me. They weren't just trying to control us anymore. They were trying to destroy us financially and legally. They were using the court system as a weapon, knowing that even a frivolous lawsuit would cost me thousands in legal fees to defend. I called Amber. She came over immediately. When I showed her the lawsuit, she went pale. "They're insane," she whispered. "They've actually lost their minds." Maybe they had. Or maybe this was who they'd always been, and we'd just finally pushed back hard enough to see it clearly. Either way, we were in a fight now. A real one, and I had no idea how we were going to survive it. The law office was in a converted historic building downtown, the kind with exposed brick and tall windows that probably looked charming in a different context. Today, it just felt intimidating. I sat across from Marcus Williams, an attorney who'd been recommended by Brad's wife. She worked as a paralegal at a different firm and said Marcus was tough, fair, and didn't take garbage cases. Marcus read through the lawsuit with the kind of focused intensity that came from years of practice. He made notes in the margins, occasionally shaking his head. After 10 minutes, he set it down and looked at me. "This is garbage," he said flatly. "Frivolous, retaliatory garbage. Can they really sue me for this? Anyone can sue anyone for anything. Doesn't mean they'll win. Elder abuse requires proof of harm to vulnerable elderly individuals. Your parents are what, early 50s? Fully capable adults with no documented vulnerabilities. And alienation of affection doesn't even apply to adult sibling relationships. That's for marriage. They've basically thrown legal terms at the wall hoping something sticks. So it'll get dismissed. Eventually, yes, but you still have to respond formally, file the right paperwork, potentially show up to hearings. It's designed to cost you time, money, and stress. Even when you win, you lose because you've spent resources defending yourself. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. The question is, do you want to just defend, or do you want to push back? What do you mean? We can file a counterclaim. Harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Based on what you've told me and the documentation you've brought, you have a stronger case than they do. I thought about it. Part of me just wanted this over, but another part, the part that had been beaten down for months by manipulation and attacks, wanted them to face consequences for once. "Show me what documentation you have," Marcus said. I pulled out a folder I'd been building since Brad first suggested it. Screenshots of text messages, printouts of emails, my notebook with dates, times, and summaries of phone calls. The police report from the incident at Amber's apartment. The email sent to my employer. Documentation from my building manager about the false call. It was comprehensive, obsessive even. But seeing Marcus' expression as he reviewed it, I was glad Id kept such detailed records. "This is excellent work," he said. "You've basically built half my case for me. With this, we have grounds for a solid counterclaim. And honestly, when their attorney sees this, they might advise your parents to drop the whole thing." We spent another hour going over strategy and costs. It wasn't cheap. Even with Marcus' reasonable rates, this would cost me several $1,000s. But I was done being a victim. I was done letting my parents attack without facing any consequences. We filed our response and counterclaim the following week. Marcus said to expect escalation before things got better. He was right. My mother started posting on social media, vague posts about ungrateful children and family betrayal. Nothing that named me directly, but anyone who knew our family would understand. The posts got increasingly bizarre, rambling paragraphs about sacrifice and heartbreak that made her look unhinged to anyone outside the situation. But they also had an unintended effect. People started questioning the narrative. My Aunt Carol called me one evening. "Jaden, I owe you an apology. Your mother's Facebook posts are getting strange." I started wondering if maybe there was more to this story than what she told me. I explained, calmly and factually, what had actually happened. The New Year's Eve ambush, the harassment campaign, the lawsuit. I offered to send her copies of documentation if she wanted proof. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. "I'm so sorry," she finally said. "I should have asked for your side before judging you. Your mother has always been controlling, but I thought she'd mellowed with age. Apparently not." One by one, relatives started reaching out. Some apologized. Some just wanted to hear my version of events. A few still sided with my parents, but the tide was shifting. The truth was coming out. My grandmother called on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice sounded frail, older than I remembered. "Your mother told me you stole money from Amber. That's not true, is it?" "No, Grandma. I helped her get a job and her own apartment. She's doing really well now. Would you like to talk to her?" I connected them on a three-way call. Amber told our grandmother about her job, her apartment, her budget. She sounded proud and happy. Our grandmother was quiet for a moment after Amber finished. "I'm sorry I believed the lies," she said. "I should have known better. Margaret's been difficult since she was young, but I thought she'd outgrown it. I'm proud of both of you for standing up for yourselves." We arranged to meet Grandma for lunch the following weekend. She hugged us both when we arrived, held on longer than usual. Over sandwiches, she told us stories about our grandfather, about how Head always valued independence and integrity. She said he would have been proud of us for doing what was right, even when it was hard. Other relatives followed. Cousins apologized. Aunts and uncles expressed embarrassment for believing my parents without question. Cousin Jennifer called crying, apologizing for the wedding invitation note. "Please come to the wedding if you can," she said. "I was wrong to judge you. They lied to all of us." The court hearing was scheduled for mid-May. Marcus had prepared thoroughly, and I felt as ready as I could be. We arrived at the courthouse early, going over final details. My parents arrived with their attorney, a middle-aged man who looked uncomfortable. Inside the courtroom, the judge reviewed the materials both sides had submitted. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense. She read through my parents' complaint, then my response and counterclaim, then the evidence Id provided. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," she said, looking at my parents over her reading glasses, "can you provide any evidence of actual harm you've suffered at your son's hands?" Their attorney stood. "Your Honor, our clients have experienced emotional distress due to their son's actions, which include alienating their daughter and refusing family obligations. Family obligations are not legally enforceable," the judge said dryly, "and I don't see any evidence here of alienation. In fact, I see evidence that your son helped his adult sister gain employment and independent housing, which seems more like support than alienation. She flipped through more pages. I also see documentation here of harassment, attempted sabotage of employment and housing, and false reports. Mr. Thompson, do you deny making a false call to your son's building manager? My father's attorney whispered to him urgently. My father looked trapped. I was concerned about his stability, he finally said. So you attempted to interfere with his housing based on your concerns, without any professional assessment or legal grounds. It wasn't a question. The judge made a note. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Mrs. and Mr. Thompson, I'm warning you now that filing frivolous lawsuits wastes court resources and can result in sanctions. Don't do it again. She turned to Marcus. Does your client wish to pursue his counterclaim? Marcus and I had discussed this. We looked at each other, and I made the decision he'd been wrestling with for days. No, Your Honor. I just want this over. I want to move forward with my life. The judge nodded approvingly. That's mature of you. Case closed. All parties are free to go. Outside the courthouse, my parents tried to approach me. Thomas took a step forward, started to say my name. I looked at him, at my mother standing behind him looking smaller than I remembered, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no hope for reconciliation. Just nothing. You had chances to talk, I said quietly. You chose lawsuits and lies instead. We're done. I walked away with Marcus and didn't look back. In the parking lot, I checked my phone and saw a text from Amber. How did it go? I called her instead of texting back. We won. It's over. Her relief was audible through the phone. Thank God. I've been so nervous all morning. Me too. But it's done now. We can actually move on. That evening, I sat in my apartment and felt the weight of the past 5 months settle over me. It had been exhausting, painful, expensive in both money and emotional energy. But Id stood my ground. Id protected myself and helped Amber do the same. Wed both survived. A week later, an email arrived from my father. Subject line: I'm sorry. The message was brief. Jaden, I'm sorry. I let your mother's anxiety and control issues dictate how I treated you and Amber. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness, and I won't make excuses. I just needed you to know that I see what I did wrong. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. But I understand if you never do. Dad, I read it 3 times. It was the first genuine accountability I'd seen from either parent. No manipulation, no guilt-tripping, just acknowledgement. I didn't respond immediately. I saved the email and sat with it, trying to figure out what I felt. Eventually, I realized I felt nothing urgent. No need to forgive immediately. No burning anger. No rush to reconcile. Just a quiet acknowledgement that maybe, someday, there might be a conversation worth having. But not now. Now, I needed to heal. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that made Pittsburgh feel like a different city. The streets filled with people escaping their apartments, seeking relief near the rivers or in air-conditioned museums. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for the next attack. Work improved dramatically. The project we'd been working on since winter launched successfully, and our team got recognition from the company executives. Helen called me into her office in June, but this time the conversation was about a promotion. Senior engineer, with a significant salary increase and more interesting projects. I accepted, grateful not just for the money, but for the validation that my career had survived my parents' attempts to sabotage it. Amber was thriving in ways I never expected. She excelled at her administrative job, anticipating needs before they were voiced, organizing systems that made everyone's work easier. 3 months in, she got her first performance bonus. She called me from her car, voice shaking with pride, saying she'd never earned a bonus before. She opened a savings account that same day, starting an emergency fund she'd never had. Her apartment transformed over those months. She decorated slowly, carefully, buying things on sale and choosing pieces she actually liked rather than accepting whatever our parents provided. She invited me over for dinner one Sunday, and I watched her cook from scratch, following a recipe she'd found online. The meal wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and her pride in serving it was beautiful to see. We established our Sunday dinner tradition, alternating who hosted. Sometimes our grandmother joined us, bringing stories about our grandfather and filling gaps in our family history our parents had never shared. She told us Head cut off his own father for being controlling and manipulative, that Head built his life on his own terms. "You two are more like him than you know," she said one evening, squeezing both our hands. Cousin Jennifer's wedding happened in late June. I'd been nervous about attending, worried about facing the extended family who judged me so harshly in January. But the reception was warm, welcoming. Relatives apologized again, embarrassed by how quickly they'd believed lies without asking questions. Jennifer pulled me aside at one point, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for coming," she said, "and thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. You and Amber walked away from toxicity even when everyone told you that you were wrong. That took courage. I'm not sure I have." I danced with Amber that night, both of us laughing as we fumbled through songs we didn't know. The DJ played something upbeat and ridiculous, and we didn't care that we looked awkward. We were free, and that was worth celebrating. July brought another email from my father. He asked to meet for coffee, just to talk. No expectations, no agenda, just a conversation. I thought about it for weeks, discussed it with Amber, who said she wasn't ready but wouldn't judge me either way. In August, I met him at a quiet coffee shop, far from either of our usual areas. Neutral territory. He looked older than I remembered, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. We ordered drinks and sat at a corner table, the silence between us heavy with months of conflict. "I'm in therapy now," he said finally, trying to understand why I let things get so bad. "Your mother won't go, but I am." "That's good," I said, meaning it. I was weak, he continued, not making eye contact. I knew what she was doing was wrong, the way she controlled everything, the way she manipulated situations. But it was easier to go along with it than to stand up to her, and I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a good husband. But really, I was just a coward. He looked at me then, and I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to ask. But I needed you to know that I see what I did. I see how I failed you and Amber, and I'm sorry." We talked for an hour. I didn't forgive him, not completely, but I appreciated the honesty. He didn't make excuses or blame everything on my mother. He took responsibility for his own choices, his own weakness. When we parted, I said maybe we could do this again sometime. Maybe. He nodded, accepting the uncertainty. September brought a settling, a sense that life was finding a sustainable rhythm. I started dating a woman named Sarah who worked at a partner company. She was independent, kind, with clear boundaries and healthy relationships with her own family. We took things slow, both of us cautious in our own ways, but it felt good, healthy, like building something on solid ground. Amber got promoted to senior administrative assistant in October, with another raise and more responsibilities. She was making $48,000 a year now, enough to not just survive but actually save money. She'd built a 3-month emergency fund and started contributing to a retirement account. She was 26 years old and finally living like the capable adult she'd always been underneath our parents' suffocating control. In November, Amber and I took a weekend trip to a national park 3 hours away. We hiked trails neither of us had been on, took terrible photos of wildlife, cooked over a camp stove, and talked about everything and nothing. One evening, sitting by the campfire, she said something that stuck with me. I spent so many years thinking I was broken that I couldn't function without them managing everything. But I wasn't broken. I was just never allowed to try. December arrived, and with it came the anniversary of that New Year's Eve dinner. A full year since Eid walked out of my parents' house and into the unknown. This year, I wanted to mark it differently. I wanted to celebrate rather than relive trauma. I hosted a dinner at my apartment on New Year's Eve. Amber came, of course, and Brad with his wife. Our grandmother, Aunt Carol, Sarah, people who'd supported us or stood by us or simply believed us when it mattered. My apartment wasn't big enough for a proper dinner party, but we made it work, squeezing around the table with extra chairs borrowed from neighbors. As midnight approached, I stood to make a toast. Everyone quieted, glasses raised, faces warm in the soft lighting. This time last year, I said. I walked away from my family dinner because I'd been given an ultimatum: pay my sister's rent or never come back. I chose to leave, and it was the hardest and best decision I've ever made. I looked around the table at these people who'd become my real family. I learned a lot this year. I learned that family isn't just who you're related to. It's who shows up for you, who respects your boundaries, who celebrates your growth instead of trying to control it. Amber's eyes were shining with tears. I learned that walking away from toxicity isn't abandonment, it's self-preservation. That helping someone means empowering them, not enabling them. That you can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I raised my glass higher. To all of you, for being true family, for supporting without suffocating, for caring without controlling, and to the year ahead, built on foundations of respect and genuine love. Everyone clinked glasses, voices overlapping with agreements and affection. Amber stood then, raising her own glass. To Jaden, she said, her voice strong and clear, who showed me I was stronger than I believed, who helped me become the person I was always capable of being. Thank you for not giving up on me, and for teaching me that independence isn't scary, it's freedom. Midnight struck. Confetti from a cheap party popper rained down. People hugged and laughed, starting the new year with hope instead of ultimatums. Sarah kissed me, soft and sweet, and I felt gratitude wash over me for this moment, this life, this hard-won peace. Later, after most guests had left and Amber was helping me clean up, my grandmother pulled me aside. Her hands were soft and papery, but her grip was firm. Your grandfather would be so proud of you, she said quietly. He always said the measure of a man isn't in his compliance, but in his courage to stand alone when standing alone is right. You became the man he hoped you'd be. I hugged her, blinking back tears. After she left, Sarah and I sat on my couch, the apartment quiet, except for the distant sounds of the city celebrating. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Happy New Year, son. I hope you're well. I looked at it for a long moment. Sarah glanced over, saw the message. You don't have to respond, she said softly. I know, I replied. And that's the difference now. I choose what I allow in my life. I choose who has access to my peace. I choose boundaries that protect rather than punish. I set the phone down without responding, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. I'd learned the hardest lesson. You teach people how to treat you by what you accept. When I walked away a year ago, I taught myself that I deserved respect. When I helped Amber without conditions, I taught her what real love looked like. When I stood up in court and defended myself, I taught my parents that actions have consequences. And now, sitting in my apartment with someone who treated me with kindness and respect, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration with people who genuinely cared about me. It taught myself the most important lesson of all. Peace doesn't come from winning battles or from others changing. Peace comes from knowing your worth and protecting it fiercely. It comes from building a life with people who celebrate your growth rather than exploit your loyalty. It comes from understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to walk away from dysfunction and create your own definition of home. I wasn't bitter about my parents anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to change or hoping for a different past. I was simply living well, loving people who loved me back in healthy ways, and building the life I deserved. That was victory enough. Looking out my window at the city lights, I thought about that terrified version of myself from a year ago, walking out into the snow with no plan except refusal to be controlled. I wished I could tell him it would be okay, that the hard path would lead somewhere beautiful, that standing up for yourself might cost you the family you were born into, but it would give you space to build the family you choose. The deepest truth I'd learned: true strength isn't about dominance or winning or revenge. It's about recognizing your worth, setting boundaries that protect your peace, and having the courage to maintain those boundaries even when everyone tells you you're wrong. It's about understanding that family should be a source of support, not a weapon of control. And it's about knowing when to walk away from people who love you conditionally and toward people who love you as you are. I smiled, squeezed Sarah's hand, and felt genuinely content for the first time in longer than I could remember. The new year stretched ahead, full of possibility and free from the weight of manipulation I'd carried for so long. I was 29 years old, and I'd finally learned what it meant to be free. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to set a boundary that everyone told you was wrong? Have you ever walked away from a relationship because staying was costing you too much of yourself? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with the same decision. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps others find these stories when they need them most. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. There are more stories like this one, about ordinary people facing difficult choices and finding their way through. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes people need permission to put themselves first, and your share might be exactly what gives them that permission. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community where we can share our struggles and our victories without judgment. I hope this year brings you the courage to protect your peace, the wisdom to know your worth, and the strength to build the life you deserve. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve relationships that celebrate you rather than control you. Happy New Year, and take care of yourselves out there.